What is that story from your school? School trip to China. On the day of return, a 16-year-old girl from my grade stole a pair of sunglasses from the airport and got caught by airport security. She stayed behind while everyone went home. Her parents had to fly to China from halfway across the world to bail her out, made the news.
A few years after I graduated, a kite took another kite into the wood at lunchtime and struggled him to death with his belt before returning to class. There any more to this story? The killer was tried as an adult and served 7 years. It has been reported that he was diagnosed with bipolar and other mental illness and was being raised in a neglectful home. I don't know what he is doing now. I don't know why he killed him, but heard rumors that it was over a $10 or similar loan.
At a party, someone will very drunk whipped out his dick and masturbated on someone else's car. It very quickly became the go-to the research whenever he tried giving someone else shit. You just on a car. Morning news show crew had their camera accidentally go live and broadcast to the entire school a student sucking a Pop-Tart in a suggestive manner and another flipping off the camera. False. If you are in front of a camera, always assume it is on. How do you suck off a Pop-Tart? Apparently by beating it into the shape of a dick and then going to town on it. At least that's what it seems like from what we could see. I don't know. I'm not sure about the exact specifics of performing fellatio on pasties. It's a good story, but unfortunately never gained much popularity. My form teacher had a can. Was really nice. Everyone liked him. One day he apparently tripped over that can in the middle of a lesson. He was not very hurt, but the school still called his wife to inform her of what happened. It apparently went something like this. Hello, Mrs. We just wanted to inform you that your husband has fallen over at work. Oh gosh, is he okay? Yes, he's fine. He just tripped over his cane. He doesn't have a cane. So yeah, my form tutor had a cane and was faking his disability. After this came out, some students claimed to have seen him actually running in the local park on Saturday. And many people had noticed that sometimes he wouldn't actually put his cane on the ground. He would just move it back and forth but never actually make contact with the ground. Student my freshman year of high school had a mental breakdown. The health teacher failed him. Rumor was he got beat at home for it. And so he took it out on the teacher. He started screaming in the middle of class. Teacher sent him to the hall. And when she opened the door to check on him, he had constructed a homemade blowtorch with hairspray and a lighter to try and catch her in fire. When she opened the door, all you see was flames. He was shortly expelled afterwards, and the teacher took a few months off work. Don't know whatever happened to the cat. Wait, so did the teacher get burned or was she okay? That's so messed up. Luckily she jumped back in time. If there was any damages, it was very minimal. Everyone had to hide the classroom while she called for security. And eventually the police showed up. First day a freshman. After the roll was called, one kid said his name was not called. What is your name? Hal waits. For the next 4 years, someone would take a test for Hal, get photographed as Hal, join clubs as Hal. No one in the admin noticed it was someone different in each photo. The only time no one stood up for him was at graduation. This happened in 1972 to 1976. One of our custodians had sex with a teacher. His wife, who was also a custodian, kicked him out of the house. A month later, one of the coaches unexpectedly went into a locker room after hours and discovered he had been living at the school undetected. He was fired. My elementary school had a less extreme version of this. I was too young to know what was going. But one day my normally calm teacher kept bursting into tears throughout the day. And at the same time, our long-term custodian was suddenly replaced. Turns out the teacher had been hooking up with the married custodian, and he had abruptly dumped her and left town. I went to a boarding school several decades ago, my senior year. Someone built an impressive explosive device out of 3 tanks of propane and hid it near the entrance of one of the dorms. This type of bomb is really dangerous, and apparently whoever built it knew what they were doing. To the school's credit, they did an excellent job dealing with this. They evacuated the cars from the dorm without telling them what had happened, and kept people away without setting off a panic. The local bomb squad was quickly called, and the bomb was safely rendered harmless. After it was over, the head of the school told everyone what had happened. No one was hurt, and the incident was quickly forgotten. Still, it's a crazy story. This happened after I left the school, but I still lived in the area. AHS Kite was swimming in the PE class with the rest of the students in the pool. The teacher whistled for the all kids to get out and to get changed for the next class. The next class came out for swimming in the pool, and there was a boy floating in the deep end. They went and pulled him out, and he had died. After an autopsy, they determined drugs were not involved. But he did drown, and no one knew how. Police questioned, and no one could come up with an answer as to why he was left. The school was sued by the parents whose son died in the pool, and the teacher was fired. That's the last update I have heard. Phase edit teacher, I'm late 20s, was divorced to have a relationship with a senior, 18F, who also happened to be the daughter of the high school principal. Phase edit teacher's wife also worked at the school, and when it came out, she threw him out. He still needed his job, so he moves into a camper, which was parked at the school, and stays there the remaining 6 months or so. He then follows her to college and gets a job in that town. I have not heard anything in the last couple years, but they were together last I heard. Why? How was not he fired? WTF? I'm not totally sure. She was of age, but my assumption was that there was finished this year. And we want to renew your contact, but I can't be sure. Back in the 90s, a kid came out to a few friends. As the old saying goes, those friends told a few of their friends, who told a few of their friends, and so on. Within 2 weeks, there was a petition to have him removed from the school, and the other 3 high schools in town had petitions passed around to prevent him from transferring. Instead of doing something about it, most teachers and administrators signed the petition as well, and looked away when he was being harassed. He had to walk around with a friend group everywhere, so he was not jumped, and he couldn't even use the toilet. He had to go down the street to the gas station instead. He even almost failed gym because he couldn't be in the locker room with the other boys without a beating. He ended up dropping out midway through his senior year and leaving town. Edit, I should add. The local paper got wind of it and tried to do a story on discrimination and gay rights, but that only escalated the situation, which was the eventual cause of him leaving town. Mormon jock white kids grabbed a Mexican girl's ass. At the time, there was a gang called WBP with Back Power, which was a rather large gang consisted of Mexican Americans or immigrant kids. What started as a huge brawl turned into a campus riot, and students were throwing soda cans at teachers and destroying everything they could. Riot Squad was called, and the whole block had to be closed off, shut down. Kid brought a gun to my high school and fired it off in a classroom during lunch, and one of the teachers pulled the fire alarm thinking that would get the kids out faster. Unfortunately, we are supposed to go out to the field if the alarm goes off. That's the meeting spot. Only problem was that it was right underneath the 3rd floor classroom this kid was in. So we all get outside, and teachers are running across the yard yelling at us to keep going to the hospital next door, which is super random. Freeway had to get shut down because it ran right next to the classroom as well. The kid eventually let his 3 hostages go and fired at police in an attempt at police-assisted suicide. He got shot and ended up with brain damage, but actually lived.
The girl came to school embarrassingly drunk, staggering through the halls until a teacher tracked her down and carried her to the nurse's office. She was one of the conservative, quiet, mousy girls. That day she showed up hair teased to the max, skimpy blouse, and the shortest skirt I have ever seen at the time. She was the topic of every conversation all day, and it was weeks before she resurfaced again, converting back to her quiet, mousy self.
The band teacher's son, who was in my sophomore class, was murdered by a hunting rifle in a field while walking home from school. The murder went unsolved for 20 years. They think it was 2 older boys, but they both killed themselves in the 1990s. Really sad, especially because the murderer's younger brother was a good friend of the murdered kid. The younger brother was part of a group of friends that visited with the murdered boy's parents every Friday afternoon after he was killed. They did this for years, until they went away to college, etc. A girl got pregnant and didn't tell anyone. Nobody noticed the whole time she was pregnant, and she finally gave birth in the school bathroom to a stillborn. She hid the body in her locker, and the body was found one day by the janitor, who noticed a weird smell coming from the locker. The poor soul ended up in an institution. Her dad was actually a good friend of my dad, and I remember how devastated he was for years after. A tragic story. When I was a freshman in high school, I was on the JV football team, and we had a physical trainer who everyone hated. Our football team won our last game of the season, and it was only our second win of the year. Naturally, we were celebrating pretty loudly in the locker room that night. Out of nowhere, the athletic trainer burst into the locker room and cussed us out, seemingly just for being joyous about the win. The next morning, I'm walking around the hallways of the school, and I noticed a bunch of people with printed pictures of his face taped to their t-shirts. Turns out, right about the time he came in the locker to yell at us, he found out that he had been caught for soliciting sex from a minor over the internet. Everyone hated this man to the extent that the next day they printed off his mugshot and walked around the school with it taped to their t-shirt.